Sure. Thank you.
Ruchem Aboim B'Shem Irgen Shir Torah. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rabbi Yakov of Smith Shlita on the halachos of making tea on Shabbos. That was a great exclusive sponsor of shir. Call Irgen Shir Torah at 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Rav Smith.
Today's sugya was like many other sugyas, began with a few random shilas making tea on Shabbos. If you forgot to make tea scent, can you make it on Shabbos with the shlishi and instant tea and adding honey? And then I realized, as is always the case, it's really one yesod that we have to clarify before we could approach this intelligently. And really it's the yesod of tea. Now, the emissaries will see that tea is basically just a few hundred years that it's been used in America and Europe, but it's specifically about tea as opposed to almost any other food, which makes it a very exciting, very challenging question, because really it's, even if you're not a tea drinker, but it brings us the yesodis of Hilchos Shabbos from a whole different angle, and that is the uniqueness of tea. And let me explain. Tea, as in tea leaves, grow on a bush. Actually, it's an evergreen shrub. It's not too high. It's really higher than a bush. In other words, it would be had it grown fruit, it would be a bar priya eitz. But it's basically the leaves of a bush that is put in water, and of course gives out the tea flavor. Now, I did some, studying to figure this out. It's interesting, there are so many different types of teas and different varieties of teas, but it's all how you process the various tea leaves. But to make a long story short, what's important for us, that tea is not found in the Gemara or the Rishonim or the Shulchan Aruch. It became popular in the late 1600s, that's the way I understood. That's why the American Revolution was the Boston Tea Party, which was just about 100 years later. But what's challenging is you're not going to find the Gemara in Rishonim or Shulchan Aruch. But today it has, again, many, many different shilas. How do you apply Hilchos Shabbos to Hilchos Tea? But what makes it a little more challenging, because the Pri Megadim, the Aruch HaShulchan, and Mishnah Berurah, and many achrayim from that kufa do speak about tea, but if you'll notice, they always speak about alei tea, tea leaves. Now that's another important bit of information that we have to clarify. The way tea was always made until approximately the 1940s, you had tea leaves and you put it in water and you made tea. That was basically the way tea was made. There was a certain way of making tea, the certain keli that they used, but basically it was the actual tea leaves that were used. Today we have tea bags, and as we'll see, has a very big impact on halacha, but this is a typical tea bag, and inside of it is no longer tea leaves like it used to be. As you can see, this is ground, chopped tea leaves, which also will have an impact on halacha. Now, someone told me, it's interesting how tea bags came about was by mistake, like many other inventions. Someone wanted to market various tea flavors, and he didn't want to give out a whole big box of them, so he gave out small samples in a small bag, and people took the bag and put it into the hot water, and they said, hey, that's a good idea. Why do I have to struggle with tea leaves and taking it out? You drink the tea leaves goes into your mouth. So by mistake, they started making. Actually, in 1908, that's when the mistake came about, but it took many years till 1944, the rectangular bag that we use today was marketed. But in the tea bags themselves, it's interesting, there are two different types. Typically this is a paper, of course highly porous. There is a tea bag that has holes in it, micro holes in it, and we'll soon see the impact of that. But basically, the tea bag today is very different than the tea leaves of the paiskim. And then you have instant tea, and you have decaffeinated tea. So we have quite an agenda. But what Rabbi said, I think the yesod of today, which is the challenge of today, and doik v'tishkach, tea is different than almost every other food. Because every other food, you cook it before you eat it. If you want to eat it cooked, you cook it, right? So when you have a cooked food on Shabbos, we have halachos of ein bishul bishul. Think about it. Tea is almost never cooked halachically, because very, very few people take tea leaves and put it into a cholent pot and cook it. How do we typically make a tea? So you take water from an urn and you put it into a hot cup, and then you add the tea bag. So in the best, this is a klisheni. Don't forget, the cup is a klisheni. Some people, on Shabbos especially, they put it into one cup and the second cup. So you're putting a tea bag into a kli shlishi. Is that considered bishul in a kli shlishi? So basically, the problem, the challenge of today is that our bishul, our tea, is not even halachically bishul. Many people still use a chaynik. What is a chaynik? They put water from the urn into a chaynik, and they add the tea bags into the chaynik. Again, it's a klisheni. I'm not talking about halachos Shabbos. The non-Jewish world typically make a tea like we make a tea. You put water into a hot cup and you add a tea bag. Okay, maybe a little fancier. You put the tea bag first and you add water to it, so it's an iri kli rishon. But typically, tea is not cooked. So I could have one of two conclusions. Either we'll say that tea somehow gets cooked, even in a kli shleini or shlishi. Or maybe I'll say, no, you got it all wrong. Tea is not mevushal. It's a good tea and enjoy it, gesundheit, but it's not mevushal halacha. And then afkaminas will be the rest of the shir. So sit up or sit back and enjoy. The Mishnah in Shabbos, and the end of that, Membeis Amar Aleph, ha'ilfas v'agder she'avirim murusachim lo yiten l'soichon tavlin. Basically, what that means is, I'll give you a perfect mashal. A woman made a soup, a chicken soup, l'kavod Shabbos. She forgot to spice it, and you cannot serve unspiced soup. It won't go. So you want to add spices, but everybody knows you can't add spices on Shabbos. It's bishul. So the Mishnah says not only you're not allowed to add spices to the pot of soup on the fire, even if you took the pot off the fire. So now you have a pot of hot soup that's not on the fire. You can add spices. Why not? The pot is not on the fire. So Rashi says the key word, the kli rishon, kol zman she'reiseach mevashal. So to put that very simply, and this is something that we're going to have to use, so let's get this straight. The pot on the fire is the kli rishon. An urn is a kli rishon. But a pot on the fire is a kli rishon. And the Mishnah is telling us that a kli rishon has the capabilities of cooking even off the fire. So even if you take the pot off the fire, you can add the spices. It's the same kli rishon. And evidently, the fact that it was on the fire, it absorbed heat from the fire, it is still fully capable of cooking in halacha. But notice, the Mishnah says you can't even put in spices. Spices don't get cooked easily. But evidently, a kli rishon could cook even spices because it has the effect from the fire, even though it's not on the fire any longer. Okay. So therefore, it would make a lot of sense to say, if someone takes tea leaves or tea bags and puts it into a kli rishon, that would be bishul deraisa. Because if it cooks spices, it cooks tea bags, pashut. And the Mishnah in Shin Yud Ches Yivkat Lam Betes, when he speaks about tea, he says pashut, that if a person cooks tea leaves, again he didn't have tea bags, but tea leaves, b'meizid yesh issa skila. Now when I learned that, it sent a shudder down my spine, because very rarely will an Erel Chayid encounter a malacha deraisa of bishul that's chayiv skila. Because typically our shabbos are in muktzah and chazara and shehiyah and v'da bedova. But where does an Erel Chayid, Mr. Burr, accuse him of issa skila? I don't want to touch that, but that's nothing great. And here a bishul of tea leaf is bishul deraisa. It has been pashit, because the tea leaf is uncooked and you're cooking it. What's the shayla? So to add tea leaves to a pot on the fire or off the fire is bishul deraisa. But the emes is we all realize that we basically don't do that. No one adds tea leaves to a hot pot of soup or even the hot pot of water. It's just not done. But Rabbi say, we have another important bit of information that we have to know for us, or in those days as well, but today we could see it very clearly. You b'derech klal, tea leaves and certainly tea bags is not that you took the leaf off the tree and put it into the hot water. The tea leaves had to be treated. Now, I did a lot of research, but it's not again most of it. But basically, you have to bring out the flavor of a tea leaf. And there are so many, there's black tea, and there's green tea. But basically, to put it bluntly, it's the oxidation process of either limiting or stopping the oxidation process that brings out the flavor of the tea leaf. Now what that means in simple English is they don't just take the leaf and put it into your hot cup of water. They first heat it, approximately 100 degrees Fahrenheit, but they heat it to take out the moisture, and that either prevents or limits the oxidation process. That brings out the full flavor. Now whether you understood or not is not negeya. But the tea leaves are heated in an oven. So now we have a great idea. Since Lamaisa, the tea leaves were once cooked, l'chayra, we could say ein bishul acha bishul, and you could put even a unused tea leaf into a hot water. That's the Mishnah in Shabbos, Kufam Hamad Beis, that by a dava yavesh, a dry food, ein bishul acha bishul. So maybe taka, the only issa of tea that's chayiv skila was if you took it off the tree, but you didn't process it. But our tea leaves or tea bags today was certainly processed. And this seems to be an old taina or an old heta, excuse. The Binyan Siyan, and this truth was written Tuf Reish Tes, close to 100 and over 170 years ago. That's the Earl Chaner's Tshuva Sefer Siman Yud Zayin. He says, I'm losing a lot of sleep because I see Chilul Shabbos. People make tea on Shabbos. How can we let this go on? And they tell me that it comes from China, rather the biggest producers of tea for centuries was China. And people say that in China they cook the tea leaves. So ein bishul acha bishul. So he writes back, it's sheker, it's not true, it's not cooked, and they're nichshol is a skila. He doesn't explain anything of the Metzias, but it's interesting, the Aruch HaShulchan in Shin Yud Ches Siv Chav Ches also speaks about tea. It's chayiv chatas, and people say taina shel hevel, that it's cooked. It's not true. He says that if it's cooked and you couldn't sell it, his lashon is you couldn't sell it b'kesef mole like it's sold. It's not cooked, and the whole thing is a terrible excuse. And even the Mishnah Berurah in Sivkot Lambetes and Sharetzin and Sivkot Nun Hey alludes to that people are makel because it's cooked. But again, it was unclear what's going on. People are still looking for baba maisis. So then I saw Rav Moshe in Chelik Bey Siman Pei Hey, and again, my research is exactly like Rav Moshe found it because he did research. Someone asked him this question: tea leaves that are nisyabesh, can we say it's mutter because they ain't bishul acha bishul? So Rav Moshe first said your premise is wrong, because in the best scenario, if the tea leaves are heated, it wasn't cooked in water, it was afiyah, and yesh bishul acha afiyah. So the whole premise is faulty, but more so, says Rav Moshe, the fact that it's heated does not make it cooked. And Rav Moshe says a big yisoid. The din of ein bishul acha bishul is if the first bishul changed it from raw to cooked. But if it's the same after the heating process, it's not cooked. And Rav Moshe brings a raya from shemen. The Gemara has a shita that there's no bishul by shemen, even though you cook it to a very high temperature, because it's not heating, it's changing. Zokt Rav Moshe, a tea bag that's heated is not a used tea bag. You don't sell used tea bags. So the process is done, again, to stop the oxidation, like I explained to you, but it's not a cooked tea bag. So I would say it's treated and heated, but not cooked. You know what an analogy, if you want, to that is the famous kasha in Bialoch and Shiyud Ches Sif Tezvav quotes both the Beis Meah and the Maimon Mordechai that asked a very troubling question. Any Erlich Yid knows you're allowed to take a cold piece of chicken from the refrigerator that's fully cooked and put it on the top of the cholent pot or on the side of the blech, not on the blech, but on the side, and you can make it piping hot, ein bishul acha bishul. So frag the Maimon Mordechai and the Beis Meah, why is that a problem of yesh afiyah acha bishul, or tzli? You're heating it, so it's either afiyah or tzli. And the Bialacha says, is it blai tzarchi? It's a good kasha. Zog the Heilige Chazanish in Lamed Zayin Yudalid, you're making a mistake. Tzli is on the fire. You're not putting it on the fire. You're not putting it on the fire. You're warming it. Oh, so you say by default, if it's not bishul, it's got to be tzli or afiyah. Maybe it's none of the above. Maybe it's warming. In other words, warming is not cooking or baking. So I would say the same thing. The tea bags are treated and heated, but not cooked. If it's not cooked, we're back to a raw tea leaf, and chas v'shalom, it is chayiv skila. So that's why all the paiskim say that tea leaves and tea of today is not cooked. I'm going to use the word, it's a raw tea bag, even though the proper word is probably a fresh tea bag, because I have to stress that a tea bag is considered raw, ain't mevushal at all. But I have l'chayra a great idea. I will not cook it in a kli rishon. No one does that. I'm going to put the water into a hot cup, and then I will add the tea, the raw tea bag into that, and I have no problems. Why? Because kli sheni is not mevushal l'chayra. Or I'll even be a little more aggressive. I will put the tea bag in to this hot cup and pour water from the urn or from the kettle on top of it, because that's not kli rishon any longer. It's coming out of the kli rishon. So that is basically wrong, and I have to explain why. It's a terrible mistake for two reasons. First of all, as we'll soon see, the assumption that tea does not get cooked in a kli sheni in this hot cup is wrong, because tea, as we'll see, is kali abishal and does get cooked in a kli sheni. But there's another more fundamental mistake that we have to understand. And that is, if I do just this, I take a clean cup, I put in a tea bag, and I pour water from the kettle into this, it's fine, because it's not kli rishon. So the truth is, you're right, it's not kli rishon, because this is kli rishon, and this is kli sheni. But the hot water was not first poured into the cup, and then you added the tea bag. The hot water was poured onto the tea bag. And that's called irui kli rishon. You're pouring from a kli rishon. Now, irui kli rishon is what you say in Yiddish, nishtein nishteher. It doesn't have the intensity of the kli rishon because it left the kli rishon. But it doesn't have the ma'il of a kli sheni, because before it went into the kli sheni and the walls cooled it off, the hot water hit the tea bag directly. And to make a long story short, that is what the paiskim say, irui kli rishon, pouring from an urn or a kettle, is mevushal at least kedei klifa. What it hits on contact, the outer layer is cooked right away. If you pour hot water from a urn onto a piece of meat, it will not cook the whole piece of meat, it will cook the outer layer. So as far as we're concerned, and the way the Mechaber says it, interesting, in Shin Yud Ches Sif Yud, the Mechaber makes a very good point of saying, you can't pour hot water onto tavlin. Now tavlin, as we'll soon see, is not kali abishal. It's something that we're certain not kali abishal. So in a kli sheni, it's fine. But in irui kli rishon, zok the Mechaber, it's also to pour onto tavlin. Zok the Mishnah Berurah, because even though tavlin a kli sheni is mutter, but irui kli rishon is also even b'di'evet. So now we learned the key word, irui kli rishon is not like a kli rishon, but it's mevushal kedei klifa. So I'll say, okay, it's not so bad. It's only a klifa. So not so bad chil Shabbos is bad enough. It's a small amount of chil Shabbos, but it's a full bishul on the klipa. And that's why the Mishnah Berurah makes a point of going weiter. Not only cooking tea bags is a deraisa, but even irui kli rishon is also mevushal kedei klifa. Now, the truth is, if you pour from an urn straight onto a tea bag, it's probably a little worse, because this irui is coming from a kli rishon al gabi ha'esh. Unlike a kettle, you took it off, so that's why putting tea bags in kli rishon or irui kli rishon is absolutely asur. We'll soon see even b'di'evet, and if a guy did it, it's also asur to have hanah. But I have a great idea. Watch this. True. If I pour hot water onto a tea bag, it's mevushal kedei klifa. On a piece of meat, the outer layer is the klifa. What is the klifa of today's tea bag? In other words, when they made ale, te, when they used tea leaves, So you pour it onto a tea leaf, you cook the klifa of the tea leaf, which is the same halacha d'oraisa like cooking the klifa of a piece of meat. But why can't we assume that the tea bag is the klifa? And now cooking paper is mutter. I mean, you're allowed to pour hot water into a paper cup, and the bag is not edible, you don't eat the bag. So why don't we say that the taka it cooks kidei klifa, which is the bag, and the bag is not bishul, and everything else is no longer mevad kidei klifa. In other words, that would be a heta for us that use tea bags as opposed to the Mishnah that use alei teh. And if you want, I'll give you an analogy. It seems to be an alta Yiddish sheminig, because people ask me, do you have to toivel the washing cup from the kitchen? I says, why do you have to toivel? It's not a kli oichel. Yeah, but when Shabbos, we want to eat Shabbos during the week, we want to warm up the baby bottle that we put in the refrigerator. Let's say it has milk. We want to take out the chill, so we put the baby bottle into the shissel and pour water from the kettle on top of the bottle. Everybody seems like they know what I'm talking about. This is an alta minig. In fact, they won't even toivel the washing cup because you don't have to. It's not reif tashmishay. But there it works. You pour hot water onto a baby bottle. It doesn't cook it, but it takes out the chill of the cold milk. So the question is, on Shabbos, how could you do that? The teretz is right. You're cooking the baby bottle. Gesundheit, you ought to cook the bottle. The milk doesn't get cooked. That's beyond the klifa. However, this comparison is obviously not convincing at all. Because loimi boy, if you have a tea bag that we said it has micro holes in it, has holes in it. So part of the irui is mevushal inside, not just the outside. But even today, and to my knowledge, the commercial tea bags today do not have those holes. It's more basically designed that it penetrates, but there's no holes. But we all can understand that if it works, obviously, it penetrates and could cook part of the tea leaves on contact. Especially today's tea bags that don't longer have tea leaves, but they have chopped up pieces of tea leaves, so that cooks easier than a solid tea leaf. And that's why the Paiskim say this, that today's tea bag, if you pour hot water onto it, and I would add, it's not like a plastic baby bottle. It's obviously, the klifa goes beyond the bag and it penetrates. So basically we have to say that the tea bags are not much different than the tea leaves, and iri, klirisha, is still mevushal kidei klifa. Now, one of the Heintige Paiskim said this. The Binyan Tzion says this, and Sivan Yudches says the same thing. I found it hard to believe. Binyan Tzion was written 170 years ago. They didn't have tea bags. So I looked up the Binyan Tzion, and it's a little misquoted, but what he says is that today, if you have tea leaves one on top of the other, it's possible, if they're very thin, it goes through the first tea leaf to the second one. So he's saying a bigger chiddush, that sometimes even thin tea leaves goes beyond the tea leaf. But certainly, a tea bag will not stop by just cooking the bag, it will cook the tea inside as well. So as we see that we don't have a heta for using tea leaves, or even irreclamation of a tea bag. But the emes is, let us think of perhaps a better heta. And that is, I'm going to make tea on Shabbos, I'll put hot water into a cup. Now, this is kli sheni. And then I'm going to put the tea bag into a second cup. Now this is a little confusing. This is kli shlishi, the second cup kli shlishi. So I'll have the tea bag in here, and I'll pour from this kli sheni onto the tea bag. Maybe that's an eitzah. What is that? Iri kli sheni. Oh, so the shaila is iri kli sheni mevushal? So this brings us to a big yesod that we once discussed, and that is the concept of Kali Abishal. True, the Mishnah in Shabbos Kuf Mem Hayamed Beis says when something could be cooked in a Kli Rishon, but it can't be cooked in a Kli Sheni, except for Maliyah Chayoshin, Mekulus Haspanyan, certain type of fish, salty fish. Shadachosan Zui Gemar Malachtan. Basically, foods don't get cooked in Kli Sheni. And Taisis Daf Mem Beis has a beautiful hezbollah. Unless the food by nature cooks easily. So as far as pashut, the kli sheni doesn't have the ability to cook. But if you tell me the property of the food is that it cooks easily, so even klisheni could cook it. And the Mishnah gives a mashal, kulis, a Spanian, a certain type of fish, Spanish mackerel, or carp, whatever it is, that needs very minimal cooking. Today we brought this to a higher level. We eat raw fish called sushi. So obviously, fish does not need much cooking. So the Mishnah is saying that klisheni is mutter, except kalei habishal, which means it cooks easily. The question is, so which foods are kalei habishal? So that's the big problem. Because Lamaisa, we don't know which foods are definitely not kalei habishal, but we do know that water, spices, tavlin, oil, and meat, raw meat, is not kalei habishal. And I'll give you a perfect mashal. Let's assume that a person had unexpected guests Friday night. He wasn't expecting them. 5 guests, and his Rebbe says, "Oh no, what are we going to do when we serve them?" So you say, "Alta Yiddish Sheminig." If you don't have enough soup, Lektzia Bissel Lavasa, you'll have plenty of soup. Fine. Can you add soup to a hot pot of soup? Can you add water to a hot pot of soup? Obviously not. It's cold water will get cooked. So no problem. Take the pot off the fire, pour it into a serving bowl. Now the soup is in a kli sheni, and then you could add cold, uncooked water. What do you mean? Bishul. Teretz, water is not kalei habishal, and it cannot get cooked in the kli sheni. So to add cold water to the pot is also even off the fire. But to add to a serving bowl, kli sheni, is perfectly mutter. Now there's a chayodim, yad nichvis, maybe it's more chomer, but let's say it's not yad nichvis. Certainly you could add cold water, and if you want to be more interesting, you could add ice cubes if you want. Same thing. There's no bishul in the kli sheni on water. Fine. Now, does that apply to adding a tea bag or tea leaf to a kli sheni? Obviously not, and especially for us today, because as we just explained, the patent, the uniqueness of a tea bag or tea leaves, for that matter, is that it's used almost always in a kli sheni and sometimes in a kli shlishi. So obviously they manufacture it and produce tea bags that cook easily in a kli sheni or kli shlishi. So isn't that the real candidate to be a kalei habishal? And we could even use the lashon of the Mishnah, zui gemar malachta. And again, I'm not talking about Hamashid and they want to avoid halachos Shabbos, so they improvise, they make a kli shlishi. The typical non-Jew, how does he make tea? And watch, but I imagine it puts the water in a hot cup and he puts the tea bag in. So the typical tea bag is made in a kli sheni, maybe kli shlishi. Haven't you seen waiters put hot water into a pitcher and they pour that into a cup with a tea bag? That's kli shlishi already. So if that's the way that tea bags are made and it does a good job, it tastes good, obviously a tea bag is a kalei habishal. So once it's a kalei habishal, there's no longer a het of kli sheni. Plus, Taisus Shita, Magen Avraham and Shinyat Chesif, cut in your test, Mr. Burul Amadala quotes it, that there's also a problem of mechzik and mevashal. You're putting a tea bag, a kalei habishal that is, into kli sheni, is mechzik and mevashal. You'll ask, wait a second, but the Mishnah, nothing else, the Mishnah said that tavlin is not a kalei habishal. You're allowed to put tavlin into a kli sheni. So why can't I say a tea bag is a tavlin? So the answer is very pashut. A tea bag is not a tavlin. Tavlin, the way the Paiskim explain, is a spice that enhances the main food. The tea bag is the main food. The water is not the main thing because you want the tea. So the tea bag is the food, not the tavlin. And therefore, it's clear in the Paiskim that a tea bag is not treated as a tavlin. In fact, you should know that the Pana Me'irais was the first in Siman Tzadik Ches, and later in Cheli Bey's Kuf Tzadik, 2 tshuvas, and he and many other Paiskim discussed why don't we make a bracha of Borei Priyadama on tea? Because the ik is the tea leaf, and it's not, even though it grows on a tree, but it's not the peri, it's a leaf, so the bracha goes down to Adama. But why shouldn't it be a Borei Priyadama? I'll say, what do you mean? But the water is the main part of it, but the tea is the main ingredient of it. So the real teretz that the Paiskim say regarding tea and coffee and beer should be mezainis is the Taisvis in Brachis says Yisai that on all drinks except for wine we make a shakal nebedvari. Otherwise, beer would be a bar min and bezaynos, and coffee might be a bar priate, and tea might be a bar priadama. The point is that tea bag is the main food, it's not a tavlin. So, therefore, putting the tea bag into a klisheni will not be a het at all. It's the same bishul of a kalia bishul. You'll say I'll make an iri klisheni, in other words, I'll have 2 cups, I'll pour the water into this cup, and then I'll put the tea bag into a second cup and pour from here into that. So that's a little better. Iri klisheni is not klisheni, but as we'll soon see, that could be even klishlishi is a problem, but iri klisheni is still a problem of bishul. And that's why the Mishnah Berurah Sif Katan Lam Betes says that basically I'm not makel by a klisheni or even an iri klisheni regarding tea. What is a big question for people that forgot to make tea cents is fine. I won't use kli rishon, klisheni, iri. Can I use the het of kli shlishi? In other words, I'll take 1 cup, fill it up with hot water, pour it into a different clean empty cup, which is now kli shlishi, and then I'll add the tea bag or tea leaves into the kli shlishi. So it's not iri, klisheni, it is a real kli shlishi. So here we come to a very challenging question because it has so many nafkaminas and it's unfortunately not clear in the earlier poskim. The truth is, the starting point is that kli sheni is mutter, as I state in the Mishnah, except for kali abishal. We treat all foods as a safek kali abishal except for water and oil and tavlin and meat. Fine, it's a chumrah, safek. So the Yereim calls it a safek deraisa, so you don't play around with safek deraisa. But at the end of the day, kli sheni is mutter if it's not kali abishal, and we treat everything kali abishal. So maybe we could say, okay, that's kli sheni. Kli shlishi man dechar shmei. It's just incapable of cooking. So anything is mutter, even kali abishal. However, you'll say, wait a second. If something is kali abishal and doesn't need the heat of the walls, so manishtan a kli sheni, a kli shlishi, or a kli revi. If you tell me you need heat, a fire, so then it's kli rishon. But since you do acknowledge that kali abishal gets cooked without the kli rishon, so mali sheni or shlishi. And Re'ez Apella, the yisoid of kali abishal, that we treat everything as a safek kali abishal, was one of the gedolei rishonim, one of the baliyat toises, the Yereim. It's in our standard prints, it's Amud Kufla Madalad, it's a very long shtickle in Simon Reish Ayin Daled. But in Amud Kufla Madalad, the Rabbi Lezer Mitzvah, one of the Baliyat Toises, says we have to treat all foods like a safek kali abishal, except what I mentioned, and therefore don't put it in a kli sheni, va'af bi kli shlishi. So once you tell me that the makar of kali abishal is even kli shlishi, so how could you be makel with the kli shlishi? The Bach spells out that since we're machmir al potentially cooking in a kli sheni, hu adin shlishi urevi. He goes a step further than the Yereim. And the Chasam Sofer and Yeredeya Simon Tzadik Hey, and so the Chazinish Nun Beis Yotes, all say that vivait we achayshish kali abishal gets cooked easily, even in a kli shlishi. But what's most significant for us is the Aruch HaShulchan in Siv Chav Ches and Shin Yud Ches. The Aruch HaShulchan says some people make tea in a kli sheni and the chayiv chatos befrat she'einenu royos shemizbashlim bekli sheni uvekli shlishi shebishulan kal. The Aruch HaShulchan makes a sweeping statement that open your eyes, take a tea bag or tea leaf in his days, put it into a kli shlishi, and you'll see it gets cooked. In other words, he's assuming that a tea leaf, tea bag is kali abishal, and it gets cooked because you enjoy the hot tea from the kli shlishi. And the Shmir Shabbos in Aleph Samach Gimel paskins like this. I saw, in fact, the Shvisa Shabbos and the Psicha and Bishul Tezayin says, even if you're makel regarding kali kli shlishi, regarding hilchas issa v'heta, kashrus, but not on Shabbos, that's very chomer. And what I found really is a raya to all this, the Mishnah Berurah in Sif Katan Lametes struggles to find an eitzah if you got to make tea essence before Shabbos. And he doesn't suggest making it a kli shlishi. They certainly had kli shlishi in his time. So it seems very clear that if we assume that tea bag is a kali abishal, which it is, then even a kli shlishi and perhaps revi would be awesome. However, there is a prima godam in Shin Yud Chesif Katan Lamed Hey and Eish Lavram that basically says that it stops by kli sheni and there's no issa by kli shlishi. The Torah Shabbos Shin Yud Ches Tazayin, the Mukir Chaim and Mechzaloza in Siv Katan Aleph, and most emphatically Rav Moshe in Chelik Dalet Siman Ayin Dalet in Bishul Tezvav was asked this very question. I forgot to make tea essence before Shabbos. Can I use a kli shlishi? Which is very easy to do. You have 2 cups and put the tea bag in. So Dr. Rabbi Moshe, nothing gets cooked in a kli shlishi. The whole assumption is incorrect. And tea bags is no different than anything else. The Aruch HaShulchan says Einenu Ro'os that you make a tea in a kli shlishi and it has a tea flavor, so it must be it gets cooked. Dr. Rabbi Moshe, that's not true. Because you take a tea bag and put it into cold water and you let it steep for a while, it also has a tea flavor. So obviously the fact that it tastes good does not mean that it's cooked. Now this is the neshama of today's share. This is the crux of the issue. The Aruch HaShulchan is saying if you cook tea bag in a kli shlishi, it's cooked. Rabbi Moshe is saying it's not cooked. So in other words, people that have been drinking tea in a kli shlishi haven't had a cooked tea in their lifetime. It's like a cold tea that upsets hot. And the machlokes is a very fundamental question. Now, this is something you have to realize is negated to this and other shalos as well. Because Rav Moshe is saying that a kli shlishi cannot cook, and even in a tea bag will not get cooked. Now, here is the point that I did do some studying, and that is that anybody who is a tea, has a certain kind of sore for tea, will be able to tell you right away if this was cooked in hot water or it was steeped in cold water. Just like by coffee, we can understand that. You put coffee into cold milk or cold water, has a certain taste, but it's not that full flavor of being cooked. So that's why we are not going to be machriya. We can't be machriya in such a harm gedolim. But if gedolei haposkim call it a malacha deraisa cooking tea bag and a kli shlishi, and again, the Re'im seems to make no differentiation. Rav Moshe's taina, we do see that people, you could even make in cold water. It's a different type of tea, but it's not the cooked tea. So we're going to have to come out and say that a tea bag and a kli shlishi will eventually cook it, as opposed to a tea bag in cold water that doesn't cook it, it just extracts the flavor. This has a tremendous impact on a contemporary question. People sometimes ask this. They're in the mood to have a instant soup on Shabbos. Basically, if you know, it has a cup, very convenient. It has vegetables and flavoring and lakshin. So to make a long story short, to add hot water to it right into the cup is iri kli rishon and malacha deraisa without a suffix. The question is they want to be from, and they're going to use a kli shlishi. They'll first put water into a hot cup. So now the water is kli sheni. Then they'll put water into a bowl, and then they'll add the instant soup components, the lakshin and the vegetables and the spice. So you're making it a kli shlishi. Is that mutter lachatchila on Shabbos? So according to Rabbi Moshe, I don't see reason to say that it's not mutter lachatchila. If kli shlishi can't cook, this can't cook. But if you understand the way it's made, and this is like a perfect mishnah. Again, I want to tell you what the metzias is. There are different variety of soup mixes, but one of the popular ones is basically the lakshin was never cooked. It's thin strips of lakshin that was dried but never cooked. Some of them are deep fried, which is bishul, but this is not dry. It's not deep fried. It's dried, and it's dried thinly enough and dried intensely enough that it gets cooked even in kli shlishi water. The vegetable part of it are dehydrated but never cooked. And the spices typically are cooked. I mean, it depends which spices, but the flavoring, soup flavoring, was an extract of cooked soup. So the flavoring was cooked, the spices, depending on spices, but the lakshin part and the vegetable part were never cooked. So this is a designed mishnah. Zuhi gemar malachton. It was made to cook in any klei you want. If you put it in kli shlishi, it has the same flavor. So according to Rav Moshe Taka, it would be mutter, and according to the other poskim that say that a kali bishul knows no limit, But certainly in a kli shlishi, if the water is still hot, that would be bishul derais. So what's the eitzah if you forgot to make a tea before Shabbos, you want to have a tea? So I'm going to suggest something very interesting, a little creative, but it seems to be a pretty good idea. I will take hot water from the urn, put it in this cup, and let it sit for a while until it's no longer yatsil ledes. I'm not going to make temperature because the machlokes. Let's talk about it's lukewarm water that is definitely not yatsil ledes. In other words, the water in this cup right now cannot cook anything, not even kali bishul. Then I will take 2 tea bags to make it even more, and drop it into this lukewarm water, and let it sit for an hour or 2, whatever it is. Now I have kosher lemahadrin made tea sense on Shabbos. So far so good. No one could argue on this. This is pashut. Then I'm going to take a clean cup, put hot water in, and I'm going to add the sense to my hot cup of klisheni water. I'll enjoy a frisch gebacken tea l'kavod Shabbos. What's the problem? Well, let's think. How'd you make that jump? You took the tea sense that was never cooked, and you're putting it into a klisheni. The answer is the water. Water is one thing that is not a kali bishul. I could take I could ice cube from the freezer and put it into this hot water if it's not yad nichvis. So why can I put this freshly made tea sense? And I saw Taka the Shabbos b'Shabbat. It's Amud Reish Samachay, and Rabbi Yashiv is quoted. So, however reliable that is, that's a pretty good eitzah, because you're just adding uncooked water to a klisheni. It's not kali bishul. But I think there's a problem with this, and that's very simple. You're right. The water doesn't bother me, but this tea sense that you extracted from the tea bag, but you didn't cook that tea sense. You extracted it with cold water, so it was never cooked. Now you're putting it into a hot klisheni, you're cooking tea sense, which is a kali bishul. I'll say, no, it really got cooked in the first cup. So first, that's not true. And if it is true, so how'd you do it the first cup? The teretz of the first cup, when you made your cold tea sense, it wasn't cooked. So now you're cooking, by putting it into the klisheni, you're using hot klisheni to cook kali bishul. So that's why it's hard to understand how that works. Now, the Shabbos Shabbat himself says it's not kedai to use this eitzah, but I understand where he's coming from. You're talking about potentially cooking the tea sense. Now, people say, there's nothing really there, it's just color. And that's not true. We'll soon see that they make the tea powder from that. It's not color. If you put this into the mikveh, maybe it doesn't pass because Mara ain't a poisel. But it has nothing to do with Hilchos Shabbos. So, what is the eitzah? If you forgot to make tea, so the first eitzah is don't forget, obviously. But the eitzah is called in America instant tea. Today's an instant society, everything is instant. If you buy instant tea, I have it just in case. Now, why is instant tea a better eitzah? So let me explain how it's made. Instant tea is made very similar to instant coffee. Obviously they don't use tea bags, tea leaves in a great quantity. They cook it until they have a very strong, fresh tea. Then they evaporate the water, and then they have a viscous liquid of tea sense, and they, using a spray dried method, they make it into powder. So basically what they did was they take all the liquid out of tea, and you're left with tea sense that's solid, which is what you have in your tea, which you want to say, it's nothing, it's just color. It's real. It's powder. It's a big business. So now let's clear. That tea powder, is there any shaila of bishul on Shabbos? I'm talking about the powder. The answer is the powder was fully cooked. It was cooked very intensely. So that's why theoretically it should be mutter on Shabbos to take the tea powder, instant tea, put it into a hot cup, clean hot cup, and pour straight from the urn onto the tea powder. Why? Because the powder was fully cooked, ein bishul acha bishul. And if someone does that, he's a sheina yit. He's nothing, you can't say it's terribly wrong. The reason why people don't do that is because we have there's a shita of one of the Gedolei Achrayim, the Shara Tshuva quotes it, that powder, like sugar, is a soluble, which means when you put it in hot water, it liquefies, becomes a liquid. So maybe we should treat powdered coffee, powdered tea, and sugar, as a liquid, not a solid. Even though right now it's a powder form, but it's used as a soluble and will become a liquid. And everybody knows that so therefore, even though right now it's a powder, a solid, we treat like a liquid. Okay, so that's why the oilam is a Baruch Hashem, everybody's very from. We put it into a cup of hot water, and then we put the powder into a second cup. We pour it onto that. So that's halachically sheni, and you don't have to be mechayishish more than that. But the point is that you're looking at powder, tea powder, instant tea, and instant coffee. It's a perfect ein bishul acha bishul without this chumrah. So that's why lemaisa to make tea from instant tea, halacha should be mutter pouring onto it. With chayshish, we put it into a second cup. We pour onto that. Now the emes is I should mention that there is a chumrah. Like instant powder, instant coffee or tea, as far as tzevei is concerned, which really is a different share, just like hilchas bayra of tea. But the Sharet Tzion and Sivkot and Samachei says to be chayshish for tzevei. So therefore, you really could put hot water into this cup and then add the tea powder. But then it sort of looks like tzevei. So instead, you put the tea powder into a second cup, pour the water on top of it. So now you're not pouring the dyeing agent into the water, it's fakert. So that's a chumrah, but again, tzevei, this Sharet Tzion, Sivkot and Samach Dalid says, we're not chayish for tzevei. So it's a little bit of an interesting thing why he's back and forth, but at the end of the day, that's not our main problem. The main problem is not the tzevei, the main problem is the potential bishul in tea. And I should mention, for those that use a chaynik, there's also an issue of bayra, because the chaynik has a strainer. I am taking the good from the bad, but then again, I'm using a kli. So, bayra b'kli is awesome, which we'll leave for a different share. But just really, this sugya, the beauty of the sugya is that it's a bishul only regarding tea. Now, I want to make a point because, I have a program, I use your cup, literally. You come to a shul, a yeshiva, and you see people have hot drinks before davening, and you see like there's 100 cups lying around, because people want to be from, they want to use a slishi, and for some reason they think you're not allowed to use this different cup, so you have to have, every person leaves his shirayim, a cup that's used. Rabbi, so you could have 1,000 people making hot drinks on Shabbos, and all you need at the end is one extra cup, not 1,000 cups. And I'll show you very simply how it works. Let's say I come first, I make the first cup of coffee in the morning. I put the hot water in here. So theoretically, I could add the coffee into that. Instant coffee, but I'm chayish v'tzeveya, whatever it is. So I pour the hot water into a different cup, my coffee cup, on top of the coffee, and I leave this cup lazazel. Okay, no one wants to touch it, right? Maybe COVID time, they don't want to touch it. But why can the next person that wants to make coffee, the mahadrim and the mahadrin, take a clean cup, take my shirayim that has cooled, cold, freezing ice cube water in it, right? Who cares? I'll pour the hot water from my klisheni onto the ice cubes. It's mutter, right? Certainly if it's cooled, the water that was once cooked. So then he could use my cup, which I didn't drink from, and he'll make his, and he'll leave his azazel for the next fellow. Now I call it azazel, it's really not. It's a perfectly kosher cup. So if everybody uses the other one's cup that he used just for hot water, in the worst scenario, even if the water cooled completely, it's water, and water is not cooked by halachically sheni. So that's why at the end of the day you could have a whole hamoinam drinking tea or coffee, and one cup is all you need. Let's use our cup and not waste the yeshiva or the shul's money. The next question highlights our sugya in a most beautiful way. Let's say I didn't forget to make tea. I made tea essence. Problem, I ran out of tea essence. So I'm back to square one. So I'm a very creative person. I take, let's say, the tea bags that I used, I put it outside in the sun before davening. People say, what are you doing? I have an idea, don't worry. Then I have a patent. After the tea bags dry entirely, I say, now we're making fresh tea l'kavod Shabbos. What are you doing? You know how to make tea on Shabbos? These tea bags were made before Shabbos. I will say in bishul acha bishul. So why did I have to have the ceremony of drying it out in the sun? Pashut. Because if there's lachluchis, you'll say, davalach yesh bishul acha bishul. But I'm very frum, I don't play games. I dry the tea bags completely. Now, this is a daviyavesh. This is not tea powder that's a soluble. This is a real daviyavesh. So now I can do what I want, l'chayr. And the emes is that the Pri Megadim in two places seems to say, in Eish Lavram Reish Nun Gimel Mem Aleph and Shin Yud Ches Tezvav in the Mishpah Zahav, indeed you're allowed to reuse a dry tea bag. The Binyan Siyan and Siman Yuzayin also says that. He says you can't make tea on Shabbos from tea leaves, but once it was used and dried, ain't bishul acha bishul. However, for us today, we realize that this is highly problematic. That's putting it mildly. Because that's the uniqueness of tea leaves or tea bags, that you never fully cook it. No one takes tea leaves or tea bags and puts it on the kli rishon and stokes it and turns it over until you cook the whole thing like a piece of chicken. It's basically what you're doing is you're pouring hot water onto it, either kli rishon or kli sheni or maybe kli shlishi. I mean, just think about that. A chaynik that you make before Shabbos. You put hot water into it and then you add the tea bags. So l'chala yois, it's a kli sheni. Who said the tea bag or tea leaf was fully cooked before Shabbos? It could be it wasn't even cooked at all. If you have a kli shlishi, it wasn't cooked all according to Ramosha. So the whole point is that we don't know how fully cooked the tea bag was before Shabbos. And the tea leaves are no different. And that's why you'll see something, again, that's mamash the neshama of our sugya. Because the Chasam Sofer in the Tshuva, it was not talking about tea, it was talking about coffee, we'll soon see. But in Siman Ayin Dalid of the Tshuvas, he was very concerned, and he said that people told him that in Hamburg, the city of Hamburg, people on Mechal Shabbos, they put hot water directly onto coffee, ground coffee. So Chasam Sofer writes, I remember when I was growing up in Frankfurt am Main, they also did that. There's got to be a heta, and you know what the heta is? Because the coffee grind, the ground coffee, was cooked before Shabbos. And since it's perfectly dry, ain't bishul acha bishul, you're allowed to pour water onto the coffee grind. He says, wait a second. We paskin samamonim, it's like types of dyes. Even once it's cooked, putting water extracts more color, and this bishul acha bishul by samamonim. So Chasam Sofer, but you're making a mistake. Because samamonim are not foods. The ikka is getting out the color. So even though you got it out before Shabbos, but if it comes out on Shabbos, so there's more bishul. But coffee grind is an oichel. People eat, he says, in his time, people ate coffee grind. So by an oichel, once it's cooked, ain't bishul acha bishul. As I state in Chasam Sofer. Now listen to this. Comes out that tea leaves or tea bags that no one eats should be similar to samamonim. And even though it's cooked before Shabbos, but if you do it on Shabbos and you have more tea flavor, yesh bishul acha bishul, even like the Chasam Sofer. Now where did I see this? The Pischei Tshuva Isalin, back 150 years ago in our Siman, the Shvisa Shabbos, the Rav Shevet Alevi Aleph Tzadik, and the Chalkas Yakov Aleph Kuvlaman all say like the Chasam Sofer's understanding of coffee. Tea is like samamonim, and there's a bona fide yesh bishul acha bishul by a tea leaf or tea bag that was cooked before Shabbos. Memonisha. If it's like a klapta shana that there's no more flavor, so it's fully cooked, but there's nothing yielding. But if you're getting out flavor, it's like samamonim and yesh bishul acha bishul. And the chiddush is that Chasam Sofer's Talmud Muvak, the Maramshik in a tshuva, in Siman Kuf Lamid Dalid, has the exact same analysis. Now, Lamaisa, he obviously didn't see the Chasam Sofer's tshuva. The Chasam Sofer's tshuva was printed after Chasam Sofer's Petira, so he didn't see it. But he has the same exact analysis regarding tea. And he says that the fact is that if it comes out more flavor, is the raya was not fully cooked, and therefore reusing a tea bag is yesh bishul acha bishul. So here we see again another point in the uniqueness of tea, because chicken that's cooked is ain't bishul acha bishul, but a tea bag that's cooked, if it gives more flavor, yesh bishul acha bishul. Now what bothered me was that, so one second, that means if there's more flavor, it's not fully cooked. So how do we take a piece of cold chicken from the refrigerator that was cooked and rewarm it, ain't bishul acha bishul? But if I would take that chicken and put it into hot water, it would probably give a flavor off, right? So the way the Chasam Sofer says, anything that gives a flavor is not fully cooked. So how could you warm chicken? Maybe it gives it more flavor. The Chasam Sofer himself avoid that. He says that if the ik is the food, Like coffee beans, once it's cooked, ein bishul acha bishul. It's only samamonim, or we're saying it's only tea. But chicken is a food. Once it's fully cooked, even if it gives it more flavor, ein bishul acha bishul. So this is the uniqueness of tea, even versus coffee. Coffee beans, if they're edible, are fully cooked. Tea, if it gives it more flavor, it would be yesh bishul acha bishul. Now the Sharatzian, he tries to find a heta to make tea on Shabbos. He said, well, if before Shabbos you cooked the tea leaves and you mixed it up and down and poked it here and here, you try to get all the flavor out before Shabbos, you could say it's fully cooked. Efsha. Why efsha? Because again, it's a mamanashach. You're talking about a possible yesh bishul acha bishul. So that's why lamaisa reusing a tea bag is definitely fraught with great difficulty. I can't say it's asur l'chol hadayis, but lamaisa, the best way to make tea, before Shabbos, of course, if you make a tea sense, put the tea leaves, a tea bag, into a chaynik. If you can't even cook it, that would be even better. But certainly the best eitzah would be to keep the chaynik on the blech before Shabbos, so it's hot and you have no problems. If you forgot to keep it on the blech, or someone took it off, did not put it back, it's not the end of the world. And I'll tell you a very simple way how to make a tea from cold tea sense. Very simple. Take the chaynik, pour from the chaynik into a cup. 1 cup is sufficient, and then you could add the cold sense right in. It's cold, bishul acha bishul, by a davar lach. The answer is no, no, no. What kind of lach is this? Water. Water, there's no bishul in the cliche, and it's not kali a bishul. You could even add an ice cube to this hot water. So why can you add cold sense? But are you cooking the sense? Too late. You cooked the sense before Shabbos. Since you made the sense before Shabbos, the sense shabai and the water shabai was fully cooked. So the way to make a tea sense from cold tea sense is put the water into the 1 cup is all you need and add the sense. Now those that are chayshish for tzviya, like the Sharatzian recommends, lechatchila, would put the essence into a 2nd cup and pour the water from the 1st cup onto that. So then you're avoiding bishul and you're also avoiding tzeveya. Now I wanted to talk a little about also adding to the tea, but I see it's so late, but I want to just make a point briefly, and that is that the question of adding honey is problematic. People assume honey is probably cooked, but I spoke to mumchim, honey is not cooked. You're allowed to sell honey legally if it's not pasteurized. There's no reason they should cook the honey. It's better, more healthy and better quality if it's not cooked. In other words, milk, we hope, is considered mevushal, even though today it's probably not, because they pasteurize it on a low temperature and they're starting to use cold pasteurization, so milk might not even be cooked at all. But at least we can think it's pasteurized cooked. Lemon juice might be pasteurized cooked. Honey is not cooked unless you know it's cooked. And the real problem is adding a slice of lemon to a hot tea. Some want to say it's a tavlin, and therefore in a klisheni is fine. But the paiskim say, most paiskim al kapanim say, that's not true. Because lemaisa, the tavlin is something that's added to the food. The lemon is the fruit itself. A lemon is the oichel. A lemon is not a tavlin. So a lemon would be suspect to be a real kali habishal and might cook even in a klisheni and perhaps klishlishi. Now someone told me decaffeinated tea bags is no problem, because if it's decaffeinated, it's probably cooked and ain't bishal acha bishal. Now you can't make svaras in Metzias. Decaffeinated tea is not cooked. They can't sell you a cooked tea bag. Either they use alcohol, which neutralizes the caffeine, which is why on Pesach we avoid caffeine, which is not cooked, or Lipton tea, the Heilige Lipton tea, they all use it says in it's brisk tea, rather, but it's nothing to do with brisk, is they use fresh water to wash out the caffeine. Bekitza, caffeine is no different. Herbal tea is all raw, just like regular tea. But I'm going to leave you to one hour. I'd love to hear from the Olam a little more guidance about this. Imagine a common case. You have a person on a plane or at home at work, and he has Lipton tea, which again has nothing to do with brisk. It's a goyish tea. Goya made it. And a goy makes for you a tea, and you watch it, and he's very reliable. He takes water. He makes it during a Tuesday morning. Fine. Are you allowed to drink a tea from a tea bag made by a goy? So one thing, what's the shaila? I mean, people do it. You go on a plane, they give you tea as long as the ingredients are fine. But look again, you'll see something unique, because we like to say that taka, the coffee that the goyish companies made, is bishalakim. But I'm making it, so I'm the gemar malacha, so there's no bishalakim. But here, the guy made the tea bag, cooked whatever they did. I mean, they prepared it. The guy made it from the tea bag into a tea. It's kulei bishalakim, and tea is definitely ala shoch malachim. Where did this bishalakim go to? If I did part of the process, you could be makel. Like lakshan, they make lakshan and I cook it. But here the guy didn't chil about soif. So there's one terrace, the Aruch HaShulchan, in Yerdei Kuf Yud Gimel Sif Chavei, says a big chiddush, but all the poskim rely on this, before the Aruch HaShulchan, that the ik is the water. And water, there's no bishalakim. What do you mean the ik is the water? The ik is the tea. But the Welt relies on the Aruch HaShulchan regarding instant coffee and tea. But what I think, and that's beautiful, and that brings down with sugya, regarding tea, we have a different heter. Because typically, when a guy makes you tea with a tea bag, it's either klisheni or iri klisheni, maybe klishlishi. Maybe the whole issa bishul akum is only by bishul gomer. Klisheni, klishlishi, who says, or iri, who says bishul gomer? And I taka saw the chelkas binyamin. It's Amid Kuvav. He taka brings earlier poiskim that there's no only bishul akum on regular bishul, not on iri or klishlishi, maybe in klisheni. That might be a special heta for tea. I got to talk to you.
Shem Egan Shir, Torah like to be a shakar to Smith for today's shir. To have the great schluss sponsoring a shir, please call Egan Shir Torah 718-851-8651 or email tapecenter@yeshivanet.com. The sequel of today's show will be after Mincha B'Shem. When I am in the Kashim Ratzagesh Baruch Hu L'Zakir Tzol Fikir M'Torah Mitzvah Shneim Ala Noach Chofez Avan Sitka Yagdol Torah V'Yadeh.